Well, it's been 14 years in the making, and today, finally, McDonald's threw open the doors to its first restaurant in Moscow.
It wasn't humanly possible, but now you can have all the power and excitement of Nintendo right in the palm of your hand. Introducing Game Boy. It's portable, it's in stereo.
In 1989, there was an unexpected overlap of two concepts powering towards international pop culture supremacy. Both were summoned onto Tetris, the Game Boy's killer app and one of the best-selling games of all time, maybe the most played game of all time. Original taglines before the portable release labeled it cheekily as "From Russia with fun." Tetris had been developed as a student project in the USSR, hitchhiked its way to now Eastern Europe, and was the focus of the wildest series of events that have ever graced the concept of brand licensing.
Hank, only 10 other people in the world have seen what you're about to see. It's called the Game Boy.
Package it with Tetris. Can you get us the rights?
Making a great story shorter, Nintendo eventually got the handheld rights and planned to pack Tetris in with the launch consoles globally. The game was already successful as an arcade stand-up and home console release, along with a submarket of hundreds, maybe thousands, of computer knockoffs. Puzzle video games were very, very common at the time, and many children's first toys are freaking blocks. So how did this game become such a cultural touchstone? Why do we have the Tetris effect, and with less than a few years since the end of the Cold War, was a game featuring Kremlin-esque buildings on the loading screen embraced by kids, adults, and then First Lady Hillary Clinton? Publicly, enthusiastically, obsessively. It was a phenomenon, even with its beefy size, greenish-white and gray-esque black screen without a backlight, and allowance-destroying appetite for batteries. Without getting too in-depth on the specs of the Game Boy, it's easy to say that it was less robust than PCs, arcade machines, and home consoles of its time. From a capabilities standpoint, its peers were older and simpler, and games on those machines shared a lot of the Tetris ethos. Easy to understand, simple scoring, minimal features or modes, super straightforward controls, and a built-in progression that would end your session. It's a formula that's appealing to everyone who can manage the buttons and disregards age, social status, and whether or not they're real gamers. But more than those other entries, Tetris also had personality. Eventually, the pieces would be characters like in Puyo Puyo Tetris by Sega, but at the Game Boy launch, that extra je ne sais quoi comes from very Russian cultural references. Blip Bloop Bach, some uses of classical music on the Nintendo Entertainment System, muses out loud about the soundtrack and landscaped menu screens. What cultural factors encouraged the game developers to exploit the game's international origins? After the tense atmosphere of the early 1980s, the changing social and economic policies of the USSR and the revolutions of 1989 were slowly altering America's perceptions of Russia and its culture. In summary, Tetris plays into this alteration. Rather than presenting Russian culture as universally negative, the game's music, in-game visuals, and marketing all play into presenting Soviet culture as exotic, yet positive. Nintendo and the other companies marketing Tetris weren't going out on a limb here. The fall of the Soviet Union and the instability of many countries led by communist governments kind of merged together pop culturally and made thematic ties between the Chernobyl disaster and glasnost, among other references summarized under a general pro-democracy banner. The winds of change were blowing around the Western world. Russians, generally, and communists, regardless of nation, were everywhere in pop culture, and American tastemakers couldn't seem to settle on a narrative.
This is the most extraordinary building in Red Square, if not the world. I want to get a little closer. Come on.
Well, this is it. St. Basil's Cathedral. It was built for Ivan the Terrible. And historians tell us that when it was finished,
He liked it so much that just to make sure there would never be another one, he had the architects blinded.
I think they're all working for Donald Trump now.
In 1985's Rocky IV, the main characters are consumed by an unsportsmanlike, unrepentant Russian fighter, and we are all treated to Siberian training montages and a Christmas Day rematch hosted in Moscow. Just 1 year later, in 1986's Top Gun, the bad guys are implied to be Russian, but not really named as the clear opponent. The menace and reason for the Navy's elite flight school is left as a secondary threat after Maverick's ego. TV shows had subplots where Russian ballet stars escape their handlers and defect to the West, based on true stories, and advanced placement students went on cultural exchange trips to the former Soviet Union. Communism was illustrated in the news with extremes, the fall of the Berlin Wall on one hand and the Tiananmen Square massacre on the other. Now back to From Russia with Fun. Americans were happily ambling down this wide boulevard of obsession, with terror on one side and novelty on the other, when the Game Boy Tetris bundle was released. And families everywhere chose the traditional folk music soundtrack and onion-topped buildings to be a token of exciting cultural exchange instead of the invasion of a hostile ideology. As a society, we do this all the time, and with similarly dubious litmus tests. Ancient Egypt was all the thing when the treasures from King Tut's tomb set up shop in museums around the world from 1972 to 81 as the first blockbuster touring exhibit. And the Amazon was characterized as a crucial environmental resource, which it is, but also as a home to savage tribes who had never met modern man and might kill you with a blow dart. Above all, the game was a success because of gameplay, but it was maybe a phenomenon because it was also left with a little bit of personality. A wee epilogue here. The Tetris and Game Boy story is totally bananas, and this is the teeniest sliver of it. For more information, check out Tetris, the Games People Play graphic novel, and then go on a research rabbit hole through Tenjin, the fall of the Soviet Socialist Republics, early American Nintendo management, and political discourse on 1980s presentation of communist ideals.